You're so wonderful. Oh, amazing. I'm so excited. Okay. All right. Praise the Lord, everyone. We are so excited to be connected with you tonight. We are allowing you just a few minutes here to come on in. We're so honored to have a special guest with us, Dr. Gene, and he is with Easter Seals, the Chief Medical Officer, among many other things, and he'll be able to explain all that he does. We're so honored to be connected with him tonight. We are bringing awareness to mental health. It's so important that our mental health is in the right place, that we're in the right state of mind, that we are working diligently to ensure that our mental health is top notch, optimum capacity, because many times we work on our physical bodies, but we often leave out our mental health. And we need to work on all of those things to ensure our lives are going in the right direction. So, again, we're so excited to have with us Dr. Jeffrey Gane, and he will be sharing some wonderful information, some great wisdom and insights on tonight. And so, we're asking everyone to come in and share. We want this broadcast to go viral. We want as many viewers as possible to be able to be connected with us tonight. Again, we're so very excited to have Dr. Gane with us. He's going to be sharing some wonderful information on mental health, as this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we're just grateful to have him with us. So we're just going to give you just a few minutes to get our numbers up. Our numbers are going up. So yes, come on in and share. Again, we're so grateful to have you on tonight. Soul Harvest Ministries not only is concerned about your physical state, your soulish state, but also your mental state. And so we're so grateful to be able to share some outstanding information tonight. And I'm just talking, so that we can get our numbers up. And yes, they're going up. Thank you so much. I want you to share, let everyone know that Soul Harvest Ministries is on the air. Dr. Jeffrey Gane is with us, and this is just a wonderful opportunity to take in all of the great information that he will be sharing with us on tonight. Yes, some outstanding information. I'm so excited. I have my pen and paper ready because I will be taking notes. Yes, Pastor Brenda will be taking notes, and we're going to take this information in, and we're going to be able to utilize the information that he'll be sharing, so that we can ensure our mental health is where it needs to be. So many times we look at the extreme circumstances, but mental health, it encompasses a lot of things, anxiety, depression, all those things that we may overlook on a daily basis. We're taking the time out now to share with you, to connect with you, to make sure that your mental health is where it needs to be. Yes, our numbers are going up. Thank you, thank you. Just going to give you just one more minute, and we're going to allow Dr. Gane to come on and share all of the great things that he has for us tonight. Again, we are truly grateful. We are honored that he freed up his time. He made time in his schedule. Yes, he has a family. He wears many hats, and he just took the time tonight to come on with us, to share with us, because that's just how much he cares about people and where we are in our mental state. So, yes, come on in, come on in. Yes, thank you. Numbers are climbing. We're asking if you would please hit the share button. We want you to hit the share button so that as many as possible will be able to take advantage of this wonderful, wonderful presentation that Dr. Gane will be providing on tonight. Make sure I have my some computers and everything around, so we have everything set. Dr. Gane, we are so grateful, so honored that you have taken the time to partner with us tonight, to connect with us, to share information with our viewers, our ministry, with regards to mental health. As you know, we've been in this pandemic. We've been suffering throughout this last year or so, and many have lost jobs, finances, lost so much during this time. And so it's just so important that we just take time out to really assess where we are and what we need to do moving forward to ensure that we're on the right path. So I thank you. I cannot thank you enough. So grateful again, so honored that you have taken the time out of your busy schedule, Dr. Gane. But I thank you so much. And we're just so excited to be with you tonight, for you to be with us tonight. And I'm just going to relinquish the time over to you because we are so much in need of the information that you will be sharing tonight. So I thank you so much, Dr. Gane.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And you're right, this has been really a stressful time for everybody. The last over a year now, dealing with the pandemic and the shutdowns and all of the things that have come along with that and all of the stress that's come along with that. And you're right when you say we need to make sure we're taking care of our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, all of those things. It's really important. So just a little bit about my background. I'm from Michigan originally. I went to the University of Detroit for my undergrad, and then I went to Wayne State for med school. And I was in the Air Force for 10 years. I did my psychiatry training at a joint military civilian program and served as an active duty psychiatrist. During that time, I got really interested in trauma, and the effects of trauma and stress, not just kind of the obvious military traumas of combat, but also all the different stressors that people deal with, particularly things like child abuse, which, I can't tell you how many times I had service members come to me initially talking about stress maybe related to combat or their marriage or work. And when we really dived into it, there was a lot of child traumas that they were dealing with, and sometimes the only way to escape a really bad situation was to join the military to get out of those bad situations. So I got really interested in trauma during that time. I started a PTSD, a post-traumatic stress disorder research team, and was studying different kinds of traumas and their effects on people, and also got really interested in substance use disorders and was the medical director of an alcohol and drug program while I was in the military, which is, as you know, just one of the unfortunate consequences of trauma and stress. Sometimes people start using or increase their use of drugs or alcohol to cope with the things they're dealing with: depression, anxiety, trauma, stress, all of those things. And then because of that, I ended up getting board certified in psychiatry and addiction. And then I got really interested in working with criminal populations. So when I got out of the military, I went to U of M and did a forensic psychiatry training program. And I worked for the state for a couple of years doing treatment at the high security psychiatric hospital in Saline, Michigan. That's where everybody who's found not guilty by reason of insanity in the state goes. The other part of my job was doing court evaluations and expert witness testimony for people who were pleading the insanity defense or who were incompetent to stand trial, those sorts of things. And, a lot of times people might not think about it initially, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but criminal populations are also very vulnerable populations. And often have faced a lot of trauma, a lot of addiction. And so, all of those things were kind of, things that I was really interested in. And so when someone contacted me about the position at Easter Seals, it kind of checked all the boxes for me, because Easter Seals, Michigan is the largest community mental health provider in the state. Has services for people with addiction and depression, anxiety and trauma, taking care of kids and adults, a lot of criminal justice related services for people who've been found not guilty by reason of insanity, or who are on probation or parole. And we actually provide all the jail services in Oakland County Jail as well. So, you know, that's just been a real joy for me, is working with such a great nonprofit organization that's really dedicated to helping the community and serving everyone regardless of their ability to pay. Medicaid, Medicare, uninsured, commercial insurance, whatever. And then another hat I wear is also as the psychiatry residency training director for Beaumont. And that's a new program that's going to start in July. We recruited 6 great medical students, or they may have even graduated at this point, but in July, we'll take those 6 doctors, and over the next 4 years, train them to be hopefully good, competent, ethical, passionate psychiatrists. And so I'm really excited about that. They're going to do most of their hospital-based training in Beaumont hospitals and most of their outpatient clinical training at Easter Seals. So that's something I'm really excited about, and hopefully will help with the shortage of psychiatrists that our community has, which has never been more important than now. So I'm going to try my best to share my screen. This is always kind of interesting experience with technology, but hopefully, did that show up?
Looks beautiful, yes.
Okay, great. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about mental health in general, but also specifically how COVID has affected, you know, all of us. And so, you know, there is obviously a COVID crisis. There's a viral crisis, and we've seen hundreds of thousands of deaths, unfortunately, in the United States, over 1 million across the whole world. But at the same time as there's been a infectious disease crisis, there's also been a mental health crisis that's resulted from the direct effects of the virus, as far as, you know, the fear and anxiety that's caused, and the grief and loss that has caused, but also some more of the indirect effects of the virus, the shutdowns and people losing their jobs and losing their businesses, and you know, not being able to see their loved ones, not being able to travel. And when all of those stresses have happened, it's resulted in a lot of problems that we're seeing. And so pre-pandemic, its studies suggest that about 20%, or 1 out of every 5 people in the United States, had some sort of mental health condition. That's pretty much doubled during COVID. And so now we're seeing 40% of people who are struggling with mental health problems, whether that's depression or anxiety or addiction, or all of the above. And during this time, and this statistic is a few months old now, so I don't know if it's even higher now, but a whopping 11% of people have seriously considered suicide during the pandemic. And that's has resulted in huge increases in suicide hotline calls and emotional distress hotline calls, and people fortunately seeking help. But we also know that there's a lot of people who don't seek help, and that there's been a lot of people who've unfortunately died from suicide during this time. CDC tracks numbers like COVID deaths in real time. The CDC numbers about suicide are unfortunately a couple years old. So we won't fully know the effects and what some people call the deaths of despair that have resulted from the pandemic, probably for a couple years. But there was a study done by some psychiatrists in the Grand Rapids area of our state, and based on things like 911 calls and emergency room visits. They've estimated that just in Michigan alone, there's probably been a 25% spike in suicides compared to previous years. And so that's just, it's just heartbreaking. And then I mentioned drug and alcohol problems. We know that at least 13% of people have started or increased their use of drugs or alcohol during this time. Based on data we're seeing from emergency rooms or 911 calls or coroners, there's been 42% increase in overdoses compared to previous years. And there's been studies looking at drug tests and drug screens and testing positive for drug screens. And that's really increased in the last year. One of the biggest ones, it really is across the board, things like heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, all sorts of different illicit and prescription drugs. But one of the big ones, unfortunately, has been this 30% increase in fentanyl being positive. If you don't know, fentanyl is an opioid in the same family as heroin or opium or morphine or Vicodin or Percocet, and it can be incredibly addicting. But fentanyl is also very, very potent. And so one of the big drivers of the spikes in heroin overdoses that we've seen is that a lot of the heroin that's out there has fentanyl in it too. And it can be a really, really deadly combination. And then finally, we don't have a lot of statistics on this yet, and maybe we won't fully know this for years to come, but one of my biggest concerns is child abuse and domestic violence. We know that when people are stressed, they're more likely to be abusive and violent. And unfortunately, during this time, on one hand, we've seen a lot of people who've been isolated and haven't been with their loved ones. On the other hand, there's also people who are kind of trapped with their loved ones, right? And no one's going to work, no one's going to school, everyone's in together. And sometimes that's wonderful. For my family, it's been just, of course there's been stressors and things. It's been a nice time to, if I'm working from home and having lunch with my family when I might not have normally, and having more game nights and those sorts of things. But for some kids and for some spouses and boyfriends and girlfriends out there, they're trapped with someone who's violent. And normally they might have gotten a break when they went to school or work, or when that person went to work. But if everyone's working from home and they're doing school from home, or they lost their job, everyone's together and they're not getting a break. And everyone's stressed, and that can increase abuse and violence. And then not to mention, when they're not going out, when friends or teachers or coaches who might have normally noticed that bruise or noticed that injury or noticed they're acting a little different, that's not happening as much. Yeah. We know that child protective service calls are down. We know that calls for foster care and adoptive services are down. And probably that's not because of abuse and neglect are going down. It's probably because it's being missed. My big fear during all this is that there's a lot of people, a lot of kids who are suffering, and we might see the effects of that for years to come. And so just to take a step back about what is mental health or behavioral health is sometimes used as interchangeably. I think at its basic, at its most basic, it's talking about our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, and how those interact. And you might notice that I must have hijacked this, plagiarized this from a British person, because behavior is spelled with a U there. And in America, in the United States, we don't put a U there. But I promise I didn't steal this because it was public domain. It was public domain picture on Google. So I hopefully no one will sue me. But it's really important to note that how we feel can affect how we think, and it can affect how we behave. And how we act can affect how we feel and how we think. And how we think can affect how we feel and how we act. And these things all affect each other. And so sometimes the best way to have healthier behaviors is to try to examine our thoughts and work on having healthier, more realistic thoughts. And likewise, having healthier emotions as well. And so a lot of times when someone is comes to me for help, or comes to a therapist or another psychiatrist for help, we're looking, they're coming to us because they're having a problem with one of these things or multiple of these things. And oftentimes it's my job to help them trace it back and try to figure, okay, you did this thing that you don't like doing. You're using drugs and you want to cut back, or you're getting angry all the time, or what else is going on? What are the thoughts that are happening right before you do that? What is the feeling you have right before you do that? Those sorts of things, and try to work on those things. And everyone's different, and everyone, how they manifest their stress is different. But I think one thing that's important to talk about stress is when we use the word stress, we often think of stress as a bad thing, right? But stress is there for a reason. If we didn't get stressed, if we didn't worry, if we didn't get anxious, we would make really bad decisions, right? If you're standing on a cliff and you're not a little bit worried about falling off, you might get too close and fall off, right? And so it's important to note that stress is a spectrum. There's healthy levels of stress and there's unhealthy levels of stress. And so, for example, let's say you have a math test coming up. If you have no stress about that math test, you're not going to study for it and you're going to fail, right? But if you have so much stress about that math test that you're distressed, you might not even be able to focus on studying. You might not sleep the night before, and then you're not rested, and then you're exhausted. And then when the test is put in front of you, you're so anxious you can't even read the words, and you can't even draw the knowledge you have in your head to put on the paper, and you might fail that test. And so too little stress, too much stress are both a bad thing. But there is a healthy amount of stress where that stress motivates you to study, and you're not so distressed that you fail. And so healthy stress is the kind of thing that facilitates your functioning. It helps you function. It helps you function in your life, in your work, in your school, with your relationships, those sorts of things. But distress causes dysfunction. It's disabling, and it prevents you from living life to its fullest and getting the things done that you need to get done. But usually with healthy stress, we can put it aside. We can kind of compartmentalize it. We can suppress it a little bit, and it's usually expected and proportional, right? So what big stressors make us really stressed, little stressors make us a little bit stressed. But what happens with distress is sometimes it's disproportional. Sometimes little things can set us off, and especially when we're stressed about other things. With big stressors, sometimes those little stressors pile up, and we overreact to them, right? But the best way to overcome stress, to overcome anxiety, is through exposure. In fact, in mental health, we talk about exposure therapy. So if you're afraid of flying, we help ease you into flying. If you're afraid of driving, ease you in. If you're afraid of spiders, we get you used to look at a picture of a spider and hold a toy spider, maybe even hold a real spider. We kind of gradually desensitize you so you can do that thing. Same thing with public speaking, right? I've done hundreds of classes and given lots of speeches, but the first few times I gave speeches, my voice would tremble and my knees would shake and my hands would shake, and now it's easier because I've done it over and over and over. And that's how we manage healthy stress, right? You work your way up. But the problem with distress is sometimes so disabling that people avoid exposing themselves to whatever that trigger is. And that's counter-therapeutic. The more we avoid, the harder it is to function and deal with life. And I think that's, for some people, that's going to be really hard. Yesterday, the President Biden and the CDC announced that a lot of restrictions are lifted. And today, Governor Whitmer announced that the restrictions. It's going to be really hard for people for many people to take those masks off to go out. Even people who are thrilled about this news are ready to go out. you know, the first time you're in a crowd, I imagine, and someone brushes up your shoulder accidentally, it's gonna be a little bit unsettling, a little bit surprising, because we're just not used to that anymore, right? And the longer we've spent quarantined and restricted, the harder it is to be going to be to go back to normal. But it's so important that we gradually go back to normal and have our lives and see our families and get to work. So there's lots of different kinds of traumas and stressors out there. Some are physical, things like child abuse that I talked about, rape, physical assault, war, life-threatening illnesses. That's been something that many of us have had to deal with or watch our loved ones deal with in the last year, right? But there's also psychological stressors and psychological traumas. And so those are things like grief and loss that people have dealt with during this pandemic, and social isolation. I'll just also point out that all of these things here, especially when they occur in childhood, have been linked with worse mental health problems as an adult, with higher rates of addiction, higher rates of illnesses, things like even cancer, that the risk goes up when people have dealt with child abuse and especially multiple forms of abuse. So these things can cause a lot of stress when they're happening, but they can also have lasting impacts. And so to plug a really good book that came out a few years ago, The Body Keeps the Score, was written by a psychiatrist named Dr. Vanderkolk. And basically what he talks about in there is how that trauma can stay in our bodies. And we know that that's not just a figurative thing, that's a literal thing that can happen. And we have studies, I won't go through all these lists, but lots and lots of studies that show that trauma can change the brain. Trauma can affect people's anxiety and stress centers. It can affect the parts of their brain that have to do with logic and thinking and behavior and assessing risk and focusing. And it can affect the chemicals in our body that are related to well-being and happiness and anxiety and stress and our hormones. And so it can have a lot of effects on our bodies, on our immune system, on all sorts of things. And so that's part of the reason why trauma and stress can increase our risk of depression, of anxiety, of addiction, and of all kinds of medical conditions too. It can make us more vulnerable to diseases like cancer. But how we react to stress, how our bodies, how our minds, how our behaviors react to stress is different for all of us. And so some of us can have emotional signs where we're just exhausted. We could be physically exhausted or we could be emotionally exhausted. Some people are just feeling hopeless. We can have lots of physical signs. People sleep. Sleep can go up or down. Some people sleep more when they're stressed. Some people sleep less when they're stressed, or it can change for that same person. It changes our appetite. We eat more or we eat less. And that's why it's so important to get a healthy amount of sleep. For most of us, that's about 7.5 to 8 hours. That's the sweet spot where we function at our best, when we get 7.5 to about 8 hours of sleep. More than that, less than that, either way, we tend to be less functional, have less ability to focus, feel less rested during the day. Same thing with what we eat. You eat too much, you eat too little. Those both can cause problems. And we want to make sure what we're eating is healthy. Getting enough vitamins and minerals, things like vitamin B12 and folate have to do with the metabolism of serotonin, which is the chemical that's kind of our well-being chemical that a lot of antidepressants affect. And help increase that activity. But just making sure you're getting enough vitamin B12 and enough folate can also help make sure you're having enough of that chemical in your brain so that you're functioning well. Pain. right? Literally, sometimes stress is a pain in the neck or a pain in the butt. And that doesn't make that pain any less valid than when that pain's from an injury. Emotional injuries can truly cause pain, and you can see that in brain scans for people that that stress can light up those pain centers or make us more sensitive to pain. And then behavioral signs, you know, binge habits, not just alcohol and drugs, but TV, video games, sex, all kinds of things that people can engage in, sometimes to try to almost self-medicate themselves or distract or to numb what they're going through. And speaking about substance abuse, this is kind of an interesting graph where it shows the further right you go, the more physical harm these substances cause. The farther up you go, the more addictive these substances can be. And so, as you might expect, heroin is really far up on that far right corner, causes a lot of harm. Heroin can, especially when people inject heroin, can cause all kinds of problems to your heart, all kinds of infections, and it's very, very addictive and very, very serious withdrawal. But tobacco also, you know, is very addictive. It's the third most addictive substance here after heroin and cocaine. Very hard to quit smoking for, you know, anyone who's tried knows that. Very, very much. And we know it causes a lot of harms, right? Especially when you're smoking something, smoking anything, even a rolled up piece of paper, inhaling those particles increases your risk of head and neck and lung cancer and strokes and heart attacks. And so that's why you also see some things like cannabis there causes physical harm, and so does alcohol. And those are a lot of times those three that are really clustered right there. Those are a lot of the most common substances that are out there. These things can also cause emotional harm, though. You know, when people, both in intoxication, people who are using alcohol or marijuana or any of these other drugs can be more anxious, more irritable, but also in between taking it. There can be one of the most common withdrawal symptoms is just irritability. And sometimes people don't even realize it's because of the alcohol or because of the marijuana or because of the cigarettes that they're feeling irritable and being a little bit short with people. And so these things can in the short term sometimes help us feel a little bit better and deal with stress, but in the long term, they can make stress worse. And they can make our emotions worse and make our relationships worse and cause vicious cycles. Kids' reactions to stress can sometimes be a little bit different than adults. And so, you know, one of the common things with young kids is that they might regress. Maybe they were toilet potty trained really well, and now they're starting to wet the bed again. Or they weren't having their passy or their binky or whatever you might call it in your house as much, and now they want it all the time. And so that might be a sign. For older kids, you know, and sometimes this is harder, especially for teenagers who might be moody. That just is a normal part of being a teenager, right? But especially if you're seeing a big spike in that, their motivation is really dropping all of a sudden, or they're just acting way different than they normally are. They're more withdrawn, or they're more angry, or they're not taking care of themselves like they used to. They're not bathing, not brushing their teeth. Again, common kid thing. But if they were, then all of a sudden it changes. You know, then that might be something to check in with them about. And you know, how are things going? Is everything okay? And chances are they're probably going to say, I'm fine. But at least they know that you care. And at least they know that when they're ready to talk, and you can literally say, if you ever feel like you need to talk, let me know, I'm here. Just saying that can sometimes make kids feel a little bit more loved, cared for, and understood, even if they're not willing to talk to you about it. As I mentioned before, you know, COVID has had lots of effects and lots of different directions, directly and indirectly. And these are the statistics in that table on the left are from the CDC from last year, from 2020, of the number of deaths from COVID and the flu. You know, you've heard people say, oh, the COVID isn't as bad as the flu. Well, COVID killed way more people than the flu did when you add up all those numbers. However, what's kind of interesting is that the flu, when it comes to kids, fortunately, COVID is, kids are at less risk from COVID than even the flu is. And often, many years, the flu kills up to 300 kids. And last year, not even 100 kids died in the whole United States from COVID. So that's not to say that it's not serious, but there's an interesting age phenomenon that happens here. And then I mentioned before that we don't have the numbers on suicides and overdoses yet, but if you look at most years, you look at kids, typically about 600 kids a year die from suicide. So that's, and if the numbers are correct, if our expectations are correct that this is going to go up 25%, that's going to be even a higher number this year, in part because of COVID and the shutdowns and kids not being able to play sports and kids not being able to go to prom and do all those things that might not seem so important, but are so important to those kids and their development, right? And so I'm not saying we shouldn't take COVID seriously for kids, but if you think about it proportionally, these numbers suggest we should take suicides 8-10 times more seriously than we do for than COVID. And I hope we do. I hope people start talking more about these things, about suicides and drug use, even in young kids, because this is a big problem. You look at the numbers there in late teenage, early 20s, right? 439 died from COVID, 6,000 young people die every year from suicides, 4,000 from overdoses. Chances are most of us know somebody, maybe in our own family, who have died from suicide or overdose. This is devastating. It's devastating for that person, all they went through, and it's devastating for the people they left behind. And so this is important things that we need to take seriously, just like we take COVID seriously. So I talked about all the bad stuff, all the trauma, but on the other side, we have to talk about resilience and recovery and healing too, because so many times when people are in the thick of it, they give up hope, but there is hope and people can get better. And so I think there's a lot of ways that can happen. One thing is just self-awareness, like I was talking about before, being aware of your feelings, of your thoughts, of behaviors. Sometimes we're just on such autopilot, we're not even really aware what we're doing, how we're feeling, and how that's affecting us. And sometimes trying to be aware of that. And also knowing our strengths and our limits and cutting ourselves some slack, because we're not going to get it right. And for those of you who are parents, I have 6 kids. And at one point, everyone was in doing homeschool and I could not keep track of all their technical difficulties on the computers. I could not keep track of all their homework and all their grades. I was just doing the best I could and trying to work and trying to do everything. And I know a lot of you can relate to that. We're just all doing the best we can. And sometimes we have to cut ourselves a break, and sometimes ask for help for the things that we're limited on, right? Self-regulation. So self-care, taking care of yourself, getting enough sleep and eating, like I said, getting some exercise, right? Gyms have been really limited during this time. But you know, especially now that it's getting warmer out, we can go outside, we can go do family bike rides with our families together, and try to be a little more active. Unfortunately, technology allows us to be social. It also, there's exercise videos and all kinds of things that allows us to do. But we need to take good care of ourselves. Trying to work on expressing our emotions appropriately. We all get angry, we all get sad, we all get anxious, but how we deal with those things can affect how we cope, and it can also affect how our relationships are, and it's really important. And then finally, it's so important to be optimistic, to look for silver linings, to look for things to be thankful for and have gratitude for. And there's so many studies that show that doing that, just taking some time every day to think about something to be grateful for, or writing it down in gratitude journals, can really change our emotions, our mental health, and how we function. And so to really hunt for good things in life. I promise they're there. If one thing about the pandemic, one silver lining that I've noticed is that people, because we've all shared in this trauma and this stressful situation, people are a little bit more likely to open up about it. And it's been a little bit less stigmatizing to talk about the things that we've dealt with, the depression, the anxiety. And I hope that stays, because I hope too many people have suffered in silence for too long. And hopefully we can all talk more openly about our own stuff, and also ask others about how they're doing and help them too. So, along those lines of not suffering in silence, confiding in others is so important for, allowing us to decompress, let some air out of the tires, process what we're going through and think through, and also just reconnect and connect with people. I talked a little bit about stigma. So many people are afraid to get help because they think that what will other people think, or they think it's a shot to their identity. I'm a strong person. I don't need help. I should just be able to pull myself up by the bootstraps. If I get help, that means I'm weak, that sort of thing. And the truth is, everybody needs help at some point. No one can do all of life alone. Nobody. Some people don't seek help because they think there's no hope, that no one can help me. I promise you, there is hope for everybody, whether it's talking to your loved ones or your pastor or to a therapist or a psychiatrist. There is help out there. And even if the first person you talk to or the first medicine you try doesn't work, there's no dead ends here. There are so many different kinds of therapy and different kinds of people out there and different to help, and so many different kinds of medicines, whether it be depression or anxiety, that there really are no dead ends. And I always tell my patients, I'm not giving up. We're going to keep working until we find something that helps. And even for serious sexual traumas and combat, the studies show that if people do trauma-focused psychotherapies and do it for 2 to 3 months, even 80% of people get better in those 2 to 3 months. Sometimes it takes longer for some people, sometimes it's quicker for some people, but most people get better within those first couple months of getting help. And there's no dead ends. And finally, I'll just say, therapy isn't just for when you're stressed. It's not just to help the weary. It's also to strengthen the masterful. Excuse me. And so sometimes doing therapy when things in your life are going really well can be the best thing, because it can allow you to dive deep into some of the things in your past or some of the things you're not even aware of about yourself, and to work on making yourself your best. So finally, I'll just end with, I mentioned pre-COVID, about 1 in 5 adults were dealing with a mental health condition. Now that's more like 2 in 5 adults. But more than half of those people did not get help, even though they were dealing with something like depression or anxiety or addiction. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I talked about some of that stigma, some of that feeling hopeless. Sometimes people normalize their trauma. I took care of soldiers and say, oh, everybody has a little bit of PTSD who's been to war. That's not true. First of all, it's about 10 to 30% of people who've been to war have PTSD, and you can get better. We can help you get better. Same thing with abuse. I think so many people say, oh, it wasn't that bad, or I deserved it, or everybody on my block used to get a whooping. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have long-term consequences, and it doesn't mean that that talking about it can't help you be your best and live a happier, more fulfilling life. So for all those reasons, please don't suffer in silence. There's lots of organizations out there. Easter Seals Michigan is just one of those. And we have hundreds of therapists and psychiatrists that help people with all of these things. And there's lots of other great organizations and nonprofit organizations like Easter Seals out there too, in every community across the country. And so please, if you're struggling, please reach out, get help. And if your loved one is, please encourage them to get help as well. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Wow. Absolutely amazing, Dr. Gene. What a beautiful presentation. I'm so encouraged, uplifted. I know our viewers are. I'm seeing tons of comments and thumbs up and hearts. So just a beautiful presentation on this evening. And I love a lot of what you've stated. I remember last year, us focusing on mental health, and we kind of let it go, focusing on so many different things, trying to help the community and doing so much. So I'm glad to come back around, and we have our work cut out for us. But I love how you stated that there's no dead ends. You know, we're not giving up until we find the right answer, until we can get a turnaround in the situation. And so I love your stance. I love your posture on it. We're not giving up. There's no dead ends. That speaks to me, true, really, because I often preach a message that, God is opening up dead ends. And so for you to say that just really hit home for me. And how you stated that we overcome through exposure, talking about the situation, not holding it in. And it's just amazing the numbers in suicide among our youth. And our ministry, our campus is a youth emphasis campus, and we are constantly trying to assist, aid, promote, encourage our youth. And it's just amazing to hear those numbers among our young people. And so we definitely have our work cut out for us. And one other thing I truly love is how you state, I have tons of notes, pages of notes here, but how you stated that working with our thoughts, we can turn a situation around if we just really deal with our thoughts, go back to how something made us feel and what may have triggered something, our emotions, our thoughts, behavior, just healthier thoughts, realistic thoughts you mentioned. I love that. And I am truly encouraged because we deserve to be happy. We want our viewers to know that they deserve happiness. We deserve to be at peace in our minds, to feel good about ourselves, to be in good physical and mental health. We deserve these things and we can have these things. And also, one other thing you mentioned about how um, these stresses, they impact our health. Cancer and long-lasting diseases come about from these disorders and these stresses and depression and things like that. And so we really need to take a look at where we are and be honest with ourselves, because a lot of times we put on a smile, we come, and many don't know what's really going on inside, because we have the big cover up, the big smile on our faces. But it's okay to say, hey, I'm not doing well. And we need to all be open and need to all be ready and available to talk with one another, help one another through these things. And the numbers are not going down, the numbers are going up in the way that we don't want them. So I thank you so much for sharing this information with us, connecting with our ministry, our viewers tonight, because we know what we have to do to get better through this presentation tonight. So I thank you, thank you, thank you so much. You've been awesome, so phenomenal. And one other thing, I cannot believe you have 6 children. Oh my gosh, you look barely over six or so, but you have so much experience, and oh my gosh, it's just a blessing. So I thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for taking the time out to give us that information, to share with us your PowerPoint. It has truly helped us tremendously.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, and so want all of our viewers to know that we're rooting for you. We're standing in the gap for you. If you need any assistance at all, Easter Seals, they're available. They're available to help. And I love how you stated that you help regardless of the ability to pay. And so reach out, connect, let us know that you're in need of assistance. You deserve the best in life. You deserve to have those things that will make you happy, make you excel, make you successful. You will have those things. We're decreeing and declaring tonight that you will have what it takes to make your life happy. And we're here for you. You're not alone. That is the theme for this year, 2021, Mental Health Awareness Month. You are not alone. We are with you. We're connecting with you, partnering with you, and we are here to see that you are successful in everything that you do. We thank you so much, Dr. Gannett. You are the best. You're awesome. Thank you. I thank the Easter Seals again for partnering with us. This has been tremendous, and many have been helped tonight. So this is just amazing. Thank you so very much. We
Thank you as
pray
well.
blessings over you and your
One
family.
other thing I forgot to mention,
Yes,
we do have a free anonymous mental health surveying on
yes, the survey.
michigan.com.
Yes,
So if you're not sure what's going on, or you're want to know what the signs of depression or anxiety is, or you're concerned about someone else, there's several different surveys with different topics, and that they take a couple minutes to do, and then at the end, not only does it say you might be depressed, or you might be anxious, or your teenager might be struggling, it also gives resources, local and national resources, that might be helpful for you. So please check that out, and hopefully that's beneficial to everyone.
Dr. Gannett, we talked about that survey. How does one take the survey?
If you just go to eastersealsmichigan.com, it's right on the homepage, and I think it says something like "Start Survey,"
Okay.
and it just takes a couple minutes.
Okay, awesome. I've been hearing so much about that survey. I am so excited to bring that to the people to actually take it myself, because we're going to get a grip on this. We're going to get through this together. We're going to be successful. We're going to be happy together. I thank you for sharing the phenomenal information tonight that you shared with our viewers, our ministry. I thank you so much. You've been awesome. Thank you for what you're doing for the community, and just reaching out in so many different branches and avenues. Kudos to you. Our hats off to you. We thank you for being there, standing in the gap, standing strong for those that are suffering mentally, physically, whatever it may be. We thank you for being there for the people. And we're going to stay connected. You'll be hearing from us, and we're wishing you all the best in everything that you do. And again, we thank you so much, Dr. Gannett. You are phenomenal. Thank you, thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a good night, a good weekend, everyone.
Yes, have a good night. Blessings to you. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you this Sunday, 10 a.m., 16299 John R. at the Cathedral of Soul Harvest Ministries. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Gannett. And we'll be talking soon.
Thanks.